We're going to talk about Unit 4, which teaches us first about two new types of first declension nouns. You remember we've had the one type, the techne type, which also has an epsilon iota rho variant. When the consonant before the final vowel of techne is preceded by an epsilon iota or rho, as in chora, or what's the other one that we had? Agora. Yep. What happens is that the original long alphas in the inflection of the techne type are preserved, so there are no etas in the paradigm. So techne goes techne, technes, techne with an iota subscript, and technein. But in the chora type, and you may remember that this only applies to the singular, the chora type, those etas are all alphas. So it's chora, the genitive is choras, the dative is chora with an iota subscript, and the accusative is choran with a long alpha. So what we're looking at is two new types of first declension nouns, each with an epsilon iota rho variant of the same type. And the point that I just made about these is important. That is, these three types of first declension nouns, the techne type, the thalata type, and the masculine nouns of the first declension, we're going to learn the new ones today. They're only different from the techne type and the chora type in the singular. The plurals of all three types, inflections of the plurals, are the same. All right, so let's look at thalata. The first thing to notice is that you've got an accent on the third to last syllable in thalata, because that alpha there is a short alpha. It couldn't be there otherwise, okay? This is a key aspect that differentiates it from the techne type. The other form that has the short alpha is the accusative singular thalatand, okay, with also a short alpha. The genitive and the dative, however, are just like techne. So we have, this is our new type. The distinctions are significant but not huge. And then there's a epsilon iota rho variant of the thalata type, which is, the thalata, by the way, means sea, okay? It's the sea that, there are different words for sea in ancient Greek. It's the sea that's near the land, that you can see when you're on the shore. When you're on it, you can see the shore from it. Okay, sea is a dangerous thing. Greeks like the sea too. All right, anyhow, so the other word here is gefura, a word for bridge. And it has a rho before the alpha. So what happens is that where you have etas in the thalata type noun, it has long alphas. So gefuron, gefuron are exactly like thalata. Nothing's different there. But where you, in the genitive and the dative, where you have etas in thalata, you have long alphas in gefura. All right. So the relationship is just like between thalata and gefura is just like the relationship between techne and chora or agora. All right. That's one of the two types. The second type is more fun, and that is masculine nouns of the first declension. I think Greeks in the historical period in classical Greek thought of this declension as being feminine, but originally there was no male or female gender in Indo-European. So nouns ending in alpha could be masculine or feminine, whichever was appropriate. There were no neuter nouns of this class, okay? So, for example, those of you who know Latin know that there are these residual nouns of the first declension, like the word for farmer in Latin. That's a masculine noun of the first declension. So what happened is that these nouns became associated, and their endings became associated with feminine gender, but they also inherited nouns that were about male, really masculine things. And so they had to preserve some kind of masculine inflection. So in Latin, they just kept the forms of the masculine nouns, the same as the feminine ones, but they were masculine gender. In Greek, you have a very half half-assed effort, let's call it what it is, to masculinize these nouns. Okay, so if you look at the one that Belisi, the two that Belisi's put up here, and the first one is the basic type like thought or techne, and the second one is the epsilon iota rho variant. Okay, poietes. Well, this is the word for poet in ancient Greek, and it's true that there were in reality female poets and poetic traditions for women, and they're very old. But this word for poet is masculine. Okay, and I think in the city-state, people think of it, poets as men. Okay, so if you look at it, you've got an S on the original form. So this is a noun originally exactly like techne. It should be poiete, poietes, okay? But what happened is they added an S to the nominative, like logos, and then they made the genitive just totally like logos, logu, okay? And then that's as far as it went. In the dative and the accusative, you revert to the original forms, which have the eta in them, okay? So somehow or other, this kind of very limited defeminizing of the noun was enough, okay? Notice, however, that the vocative of this, okay, that form poieta with an acute accent on it, that's actually the original nominative that goes back to before the alphas became etas, okay? So it's the old nominative that survives only in this weird vocative form. And so it's the second of our nouns that has a different vocative from the nominative, the other being the nouns of the type anthropos, anthrope, right? Remember? And so here's another one. The noun, the vocative of the type poietes is poieta. Belisi picked this one from the nouns of this type because it's got an accent on the last syllable. And notice what happens in the genitive and the dative. That acute becomes a circumflex, right? We know this pattern, right? We've seen it in hodos, for example, in the second declension masculine nouns, and agora in the first declension feminine nouns, right? That in the accusative and the nominative, you preserve the acute on the last syllable, but it becomes in the long voweled or diphthong forms of the genitive and the dative, it becomes a circumflex. Okay, so the relationship between poietes and anias is exactly analogous to the relationship between techne type nouns and agora type nouns, and also between thought type nouns and
what did we just do?
Yeah, what did we just do? Hold on.
I'll tell you.
Okay.
Gefura.
Gefura, the word for bridge, yes. Very, very strange word without an etymology. I didn't know where that word came from. Anyhow, so you can see that you've got long alphas in this form where there are etas and poietes. Okay, the anias has a long alpha, the ania has a long alpha, and the anian has a long alpha. You don't have to mark it, and the ania, the dative, because it's an iota subscript, but there it is. So the relationship holds, okay, where the base type has an eta, in the epsilon iota rho variant, you have long alpha. Okay? Mm-hmm. And again, to repeat, the plurals of all of these nouns are the same as the plural of techne. So technai, technon, technois, technos. That's the same for poietes, anias, gefura, and thought. Okay? So there's nothing new to learn there.